me. That line, it's a cliche for a horror genre, is it not? You know what I mean. The unsettling apparition of a child, or maybe just the voice beckoning to you. What is it about children that gives them the ability to be so damn creepy? Maybe. Maybe it's the fact that, generally speaking, children are helpless. And anyone with a nurturing side of their personality wants to help them and care for them. I mean, if any one of us saw a child in trouble, I'm sure we'd rush up to help in any way we could. And in normal circumstances, if a child said, "Play with me," someone might just pass the ball around for a few minutes, or two, maybe play hopscotch. Children are innocent, right? Safe to play with a child, right? I'm telling you, you're wrong. This isn't something I like to tell people. In fact, it's something only my mother and I know. But over the past few months, it's been building up inside me. This urge to tell someone. I need to tell someone what happened. Even if it was nearly 13 years ago. This isn't a story I'd consider telling people. But it's not because I'm afraid to think I'm crazy. I could give a damn about that. I don't tell people this because it brings back some pretty painful memories for me. And even now, writing this, it's hard to talk about. Anyway, I have been avoiding this way too long. It's time. When I was a small girl, I lived in a trailer park with my mom and dad. I was an orderly child, and I had a normal life, for the most part. I don't remember much. As I said, I was a small child. What I do remember is that one night, my mother and father got into a big fight over dinner, which resulted in my father throwing out whatever my mother had cooked outside the back door and yelled at me. Kicked me across the room at one point. The man had a temper. That was no secret. But he wasn't usually like that. Well, at least not around me. I don't blame him or hate him for this. And to this day, I'll do anything to defend him. I love my father. However, this incident was a turning point for my mother. The next night, when my father went to work, my mom told me that we were going on a trip. She packed a small bag of my clothes and for her, and told me to grab anything else I might want. All I took was a stuffed cat named Buttons that my father had given to me for my first birthday. She called a cab, and we went to a motel for a few days. After that, she told me we'd be moving into a new house, called a shelter, she said. There'd be other kids there. Probably some of them around my age, and I'd like it there. She was right about there being other kids my age. And the house was beautiful. It was huge, with a playground out back and lots of room to run around. What I remember most, though, was the staircase. I made friends quite quickly, with all the kids running around. But there was one I liked to talk to the most, Sarah. Sarah was quiet, and she always wore a beautiful dress, always stood at the top of the stairs and talked to me. She never did anything else. Really? She didn't talk to anyone else, and I never went up to her. I just stood at the bottom of the staircase, and we talked like that. Sarah really didn't like other kids very much because she said they weren't like us. She said they didn't know what it was like to think like us. She didn't really like that I played with the other kids, but she didn't try to stop me either. She said she only wanted to play with me. Not long after we moved in, I met kids that lived in the house next door. One of them was my age, the boy, and his two older sisters. My mom said it was a good idea to get out of the house and play with them for a while, so I did. They invited me in. They invited me to come inside and see their playroom, so of course I did. That sounded awesome. I've never had a playroom of my own, a room especially made for playing. It sounded great. The room itself was fairly empty except for a toy chest in the corner and several toys strewn around the carpeted floor. The walls were bare white, like the rest of the house, and the window stood out without a curtain, just the opposite of the door. When we were in the playroom, the oldest sister walked over to the window and stared out of it, shaking her head. "Do you know what happened over there?" she asked. I walked over to where she was looking, to where she was pointing. She was pointing at the shelter, right in the window facing the one in the playroom. I shook my head. What does she mean? What happened there? "Do you want to know?" she asked me. Her brother and her sister silent now. I simply nodded, keeping quiet so I could hear the story. A long time ago, there was a little girl named Sarah who lived there. That was her room. She pointed across the room from where we stood. Well, there was a fire. Nobody made it out. She almost did. They said they found her body on top of the staircase. That's where she died. I felt like I couldn't move. I didn't want to look out the window anymore. I couldn't. They remodeled the building a couple years later, she said matter-of-factly. "Stop being a know-it-all with your big words," her brother said. Oh? That's all I could say, lucky for me. It was starting to get dark, and my mom came over to bring me back with her. I didn't want to tell her. She might not let me play with my new friends again. And I didn't want to tell Sarah either. I stayed far away from that stairs as I could. The next night, the other family who lived in the house told us she and our kids would be gone for a couple days. This meant that my mom and I were alone, more or less alone. I wasn't feeling well, so a little break from the other people would be nice. I lay down on the couch and my mom turned the TV on for me. Sitting on the other couch, she asked me if I wanted to go upstairs to our room. I said no. I wanted to stay downstairs. I must have fallen asleep. I can still remember that breathing hard. I was breathing hard, my nostrils feeling crusty from running so much during the day. I woke up in the middle of the night to the fire alarm going off. My mother woke up around the same time I did, picked me up and carried me outside. I heard sirens and the fire truck in the distance. I was pretty out of it when they got there, but I still remember what they said to my mom after they gone inside. They said, "We couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. I don't know why the alarm went off." How could it have been set off by just nothing? My mom said, "It's probably just the weather," and took me back inside. I remember as she carried me back to the couch, I saw Sarah standing at the top of the stairs, watching me. I started to cry. A week later, my mom said she found a new place for us to live. She said it would be our own apartment, not like the shelter. I was relieved. I hadn't talked to Sarah since those kids told me about her, and I wasn't going upstairs alone. I hadn't seen her since the incident with the fire alarm. However, I would hear her voice sometimes as I lay in bed at night. It was like she was calling out just to me, "Come play with me." The new apartment was close to the school I'd be going to kindergarten at. Like my mom said, we had our own place. There was 3 floors, each with an apartment on per floor, and ours was on the very top. For several months, me and my mom and I, lived peacefully in our own apartment, and I began to forget about Sarah. For several months, we were happy. I missed my father, and thought about him all the time, but for the most part, I was happy here. Then, all the nightmares started. Each and every single one were the same. It started as simple as me lying in bed at night. Then made it intensely difficult for me to tell if it was a dream or real. In the dream, I would start to drift off until the smell of smoke came to my nostrils. At this point, I would jump out of bed, coughing slightly, and looked around. I would cry out for my mom. and I could hear her calling for me, but I couldn't get to her. I stayed in the room for the longest time, waiting for my mom or the firemen to save me. After a while, it became obvious that no one was coming for me, and I was starting to get lightheaded. I managed to get out of my bedroom door to see that most of the apartment was engulfed in flames. In the dream, I only made it to the top of the staircase before I passed out onto the floor from breathing in too much smoke. The last thing I heard from the crackling of the smoke fire before I woke is a voice. "Come play with me. I will find someone to play with me." The summer before I started first grade, my mom announced that we'd be moving yet again to another town altogether. I wasn't excited. This meant I'd have to make new friends and start all over. Secretly, part of me hoped that it would make the nightmares go away. Mom said that we had until the end of July to move into the new apartment, that she wanted me to see it before we moved in. She took us both on a road trip to a town totally unfamiliar to me, in what seemed to be the long way around from what we called home. The town was bigger than what I was used to, and remember being excited because we passed 3 playgrounds on the way to the new apartment. She took me inside and we looked around. This place was my favorite of them all. It had a window everywhere that made it look like bright and sunny, above all, happy. I couldn't wait to move in, and it was sad that we couldn't move in right then and there. My mom said we had to go back home, so we went into the car and drove back the way we came. As we pulled up into our street, it didn't take long to notice that something was wrong. Lining up in front of the building were 2 fire trucks and a police car, all the lights flashing. My mom parked on the other side of the road and went over, telling me to stay in the car. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I remember staring up at the black smoke, still faintly smearing the sky, feeling my blood turn cold. It was coming from our apartment. When Mom came back to the car, her face was drained of all colors. She couldn't speak right away. When she finally spoke, it was more to herself. She could only get 3 words out. "I just saw Sarah up in the blackened window of our former home." Today, I sit at my computer writing and thinking about her. I'm still shaking, and I don't know why. It's months before my 19th birthday, and I'm just living with my dad, attending a community college in the area. My dad remarried years ago and now has a little girl from his second marriage. She's quite a bit younger than me, 6, and she reminds me a lot of myself at her age. I guess she's the reason I started writing this. I haven't been able to get the events out of my head. I was watching her while my dad was at work. I was outside with her while she played on the swing set. I heard the phone ring inside, so naturally I went and answered it. This isn't the part I can't shake off. The thing is, when I went back outside, Rebecca looked at me and said, "We have to go inside." When I looked at her and asked her why, she said 4 little words before running up the stairs and in the house. 4 little words, but they were enough to bring chills. "Come play with me."